Darren, I know you wanted to talk about rent relief for middle class and low income people in California. As I pull
Sure.
it up,
It was
let's
a
see.
Los Angeles Times article from now, maybe a couple weeks ago, week and a half.
Uh-huh.
And just to characterize it, I was very excited to see this article and see that some work is being done in this direction. Um, I've always felt that rent relief and some subsidies should be in place. The biggest struggle has always been that the way it's been structured in Los Angeles and in many cities is that the landlord, the owner of the buildings, are the one doing the subsidy. And that just doesn't make sense to me. That they are a single class of citizens that are subsidizing rent. But if a broader class of citizens are subsidizing rent and it's properly managed to serve those in need, I'm in full support of that.
Right. Well, this is a great example of that, at least on the state side. And, I guess I'll just do a little reading and you can make some comments as we go.
Great.
All right. So buy a luxury building, then lower the rent. A housing fix for California's middle class. In hopes of plugging the state's affordable housing shortage, some California government agencies are purchasing buildings, usually luxury ones, and doing the opposite of most real estate buyers. They're lowering the rent. The programs are geared towards middle-income workers, including police officers, teachers, and nurses, who make too much to qualify for most traditional subsidized housing, but still struggle to afford a place near their work, according to government authorities and the private partners involved. They hinge on a unique financial model that involves local property tax subsidies. Proponents say the approach makes thousands of units across the state more accessible to those who aren't high earners, serving the so-called missing middle, excluded from other affordable housing programs and left behind by a runaway real estate market. At least 3 government agencies have launched these programs, bringing rents down by double-digit percentages in places such as Long Beach and Pasadena. In all, the government agencies known as Joint Powers Authorities have bought more than 20 buildings, totaling more than 6,000 units. Questions remain about the long-term consequences and underlying economics, including whether the cities, which must approve the deals and help underwrite the rent reductions, will actually be repaid. Some also dispute whether the rent cuts are large enough to make the program worthwhile.
Sure. Let me pause there.
Yeah.
I do think all that's relevant, and I think a lot of that comes down to what the city is and government can often is not so great at, and that is like deciding who to help and where to help. I love that they're helping the middle because for years at this point I've been complaining, and everybody knows the middle shrinking. You need a strong middle. So those in greater need have more resources, and the middle really hasn't, and they've just felt kind of the quality of life slipping away. So that excites me a lot. But then how you oversee the program to determine who comes in, how long they can stay, whether they're utilizing it to be a better citizen. I'm not saying I have the answers to all that, but I think that's what makes a program like this work or not work. And maybe the city needs to, or government needs to seek some outside help, businesses where they can come up with some better ways to approach this and make it beneficial for all.
Yeah. Well, I was reading the article earlier just to refresh. And I think both sides have valid arguments for and against it. As you said, this missing middle, we need to help them. On the other hand, people are questioning whether this is really a sizable rent discount. Also, when there are rents in similar areas that are just as low, if not lower. So they do point
I
out quality of life as being another side of it. You get a low
sure.
rent, maybe you don't get a very nice building either.
Right. There's always, programs are going to work for some people and not for others. And some people will like it and some people won't. We obviously know that's always the case. Um, like I can start by saying, I think it's great that they're trying to approach those professions that are services that are needed
Yeah,
locally,
yeah,
physically. Police officers, teachers, they have to be in a specific location, and keeping them closer to work is beneficial for
yeah,
them, and they should be able to do their job better and serve better.
yeah.
But I would say, like to see it go beyond that, but it really needs to be able to be managed, engaged. Like even the rent subsidy program that we have going on now through
Hmm.
COVID, it the abuse is awful. It's awful. It's not well managed, and that's what people will complain about with government. And it's true. It is true. It's poorly managed.
Hmm.
Government needs to step up and manage things better, and then more people will have faith in it and be willing to provide their tax dollars and see results. The results don't come immediately, but there just doesn't seem to be a real effort to find a more efficient system, which is why people will tend to gravitate towards putting that control in the hands of private industry. But the problem is private industry is seeking profits, whereas government is supposed to be seeking a stable environment and
Yeah,
safety for all.
yeah. Well, in this case, they were talking about the management side uh, doing pretty well in terms of their service fees and percentages. So, in the long run, yeah, the government is holding the bag. You know, I think they said once it gets paid, uh, they hope to see ways to either resell it, the property, or I mean, but it was like 20, 30 years off to find that profit.
Right. I think this is, it's a 2020 attempt at, um, what used to be large institutional housing for subsidized housing, which it's been proven uh, it doesn't work effectively. Those areas become bad. It has to be more of an integrated system, and purchasing things throughout in different regions makes more sense. It's really just managing it, man. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to determine whether someone is putting an effort forth to grow and get better, and get themselves off a subsidy, and move on so that the next person who needs it can absorb it. Again, I don't know if there's a black and white uh, definition of it, but there has to be more rather than what I say to our council member. I get upset when I say, by today's standards, if you're a tenant, you're a victim. If you're a landlord, you must be the aggressor, just by your singular role. And that's
It's a little
clearly
too
not the
simple.
case. It's too simple. Yeah, exactly.
Well, it looks like here, I'm just going through the article a bit. It says the Los Angeles City Council is awaiting a staff report on the possibility of joining. In Northern California, the San Jose City Council declined to participate after city staff concluded the risks and costs of joining outweigh the potential benefits. Despite such misgivings, the programs expanded quickly during the pandemic as rock bottom interest rates made it easier to finance acquisitions, and economic uncertainty meant fewer traditional property investors were competitors. And for some renters able to afford housing that was previously out of reach, they have been game changers. I am able to do my job better, says Renee Mayer, fifth grade teacher in Marin County, whose commute plunged from 2 hours to 8 minutes when she moved into a subsidized development in the Bayside town of Larkspur. The most active authorities purchasing buildings are California Statewide Communities Development Authority, or CSCDA, and the California Community Housing Agency, or CalCHA, which launched the first program in 2019. excuse me, it says rent levels vary by income, but in properties they have purchased, building-wide rent declines have averaged about 10% from what the previous owner charged, with greater decreases seen for the lowest income units, according to John Penkower, a managing director at CSCDA, and Jordan Moss, founder of Catalyst Housing Group, the main private company working with CalCHA. Moss said the reductions enable tenants to put more money away for savings, healthcare, and education, and saving time on long commutes. Without a commute eating hours of her day, Mayor 25 said she's able to spend more time with students as well as work toward her goal of being an administrator.
Right. So, gosh, I imagine something like that. Great. You're a teacher. You want to apply for this program. You can spend more time with your students. Great. I expect you to send me a monthly report on the additional, what you've done with those additional hours, so that I know you're genuinely giving back. And that's fantastic. That's a win-win for everyone. Yeah. I think there has to be an accountability system built in, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but there should be some definition of accountability. And I think people are willing to be accountable if they're told they need to get the help and to get the subsidy, and to let them know that this is a program that lasts for this long per individual. Let's say it's 5 years. Is that a goal that works? What will you do with that time? How will you get off the program so that the next person can come in and use this help? Those are the type of things I would love to see government do. And that becomes a win-win for the communities. And then it's something I'm happy to send my tax dollars to.
Well, let me, because it's a long article. Let me just finish out on the local subsidies, just to kind of give that answer, and then we can move on. Local subsidies. The middle income programs, as described by backers, are not simple real estate transactions. Joint powers authorities, which issue and manage bonds on behalf of local governments that join as members, help fund the middle income programs. They issue bonds and use the proceeds to purchase a property, as well as pay the private companies that arrange the financing and manage the buildings. Because the authorities are government entities, they don't need to pay a property tax. Those savings are passed along to tenants in the form of lower rent, while the bonds entice investors with interest payments. The bonds mature in around 30 years. Once they are paid off, proponents say the city can direct a sale of a property with no debt, or run the property and take out a loan on the buildings. The proceeds from either of those transactions goes to the city, which should mean the city receives more money than the property tax they lost out on, those involved in the program say. Cities can force a sale or refinance as soon as 15 years from the bond's issuance, though that would make it hard to get their money back. Each project is different, but the joint powers authorities tend to serve households making the upper limits of what is considered low income to those making moderate incomes, with roughly an equal amount of apartments served for each income bracket. To move in, tenants must apply and verify their incomes are within the required bracket. Tenants who make more and live in the property before an acquisition by an agency aren't evicted and can renew their lease to stay as long as they want, authorities said. Once they do, those units become income restricted. In some cases, after a building acquisition, rent for some units at the upper income limits hasn't dropped and market rate is being charged. But backers say that over time, limitations on rent increases embedded in the programs mean those units should become cheaper than they otherwise would have been. At times, the programs have also provided subsidized housing for people who could qualify for traditional low-income housing projects based on their income related to the cost of living in the area. In pricey Marin County, that includes Teacher Mayor, who benefited from both the typical rent declines from the program subsidy as well as a special teacher subsidy offered by Catalyst.
Right. So, yeah, it's how you craft it. I mean, I could say things like, you help. There's assistance in helping grow your income, and that your rent goes up 5% of your income increase. So that bam,
Exactly.
they're helping you grow. You're giving a
Right.
little back. You're still
Right.
growing and gaining the majority of it. But
And things are
again,
moving along.
it always comes back to the accountability for me
Yeah.
that I've seen it in the last month and a half, or the last year and a half, the last 2 years with COVID. You know, as soon as you put people in a certain bucket, they just adhere to
They stay
that,
there.
how you've characterized them, and they
Yeah.
fall into place.
Yeah.
So, these are the people who talk about socialistic tendencies, and I think there are a lot of great things about them. But if you don't make people accountable, and they're just something that's available without any effort, then you won't get any effort. It just
Yeah.
happens. There will be people that will move in that direction. So,
Yeah.
so great. I'm really glad this exists, and I hope they expand on it, and I hope they get some really creative people to help manage it and make it
Yeah.
function well.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, it's a good start, and yeah, at least we're trying. So
Yep.
okay. Next, we were going to cover Avenue 8, which is our brokerage. They do a monthly market report, and this one I glossed through, so you might need to highlight a couple things, Darren. Let me go ahead and start reading it. It's themed House versus Home. And again, this is their October market report, observations on the real estate market. The past year saw most Americans spend more time at home, which accentuated the importance of our living space and refined how we view and interact with it. But just what makes a house a home, rather than four walls made of brick and mortar? Let's take a look from a few different angles. What makes a house a home has not changed, but most people want a safe place to live, laugh, love, and eat. So top factors they have here in their study: happiness, 57%, love, 51%, security and safety, 50%, laughter, 44%, shared meals, 43%. That's what makes home. Okay. After spending much of 2020 locked in their residences, most people still associate positive emotions, social experiences, and an overall sense of comfort with the feeling at home. Home improvement spending has been soaring as owners look to make their living spaces more accommodating. Hunkered down at home during the pandemic, Americans invested more than ever on home improvements and show no signs of relenting. Growth in annual spend for the sector is expected to double in 2022. Okay.
Right. So this is why I wanted to kind of go into this. First off, I love the fact that Avenue 8, our new brokerage, is honing in on, emotional connections to our house, to our homes, where we live and what drives us to live in different spaces. We've always honed in on the emotional connection and the desire to
Yeah.
be in a certain community and activities related to the area that you're choosing. That's the most important thing about being in a house. And we all tend to focus on how big is it, bedroom, bathroom counts, and which is also important to having a sense of space. And but the emotional connection is huge. And the study showing that, under COVID, what's happened? Construction has gone through the roof because people have been stuck at home and they've spent
Mhm.
a lot of time at home, and they're like, hey, I'm here a lot. I really want to like it more. I can
Yeah.
do things. Those that had the financial means to do it through COVID and into next year, because it's become such an awareness. Even now that I'm going out, like inviting some people over that I feel safe with, and socializing more. It's like, yeah, I want to have a good, but I want to connect with the people we're inviting over. You're being more selective on,
Yeah.
on who you're connecting with, and it all relates. We all just want to be more comfortable at home. So good for Avenue 8 for honing in on this, but then it's talking about a real trend as far as availability of construction, and gets into cost and what to expect into next year in that market.
So it continues. No one spends more on home renovation than Californians, specifically homeowners around the Bay Area and LA. So you can see here, average spend of home renovations by city, 2020. San Jose was number one, 30,000. San Francisco, 21,750. Los Angeles, 20,500. San Diego, 20,000. and then out to Miami, 20,000. The national average is 15,000. Nationwide, the median spend on renovation per household was 15,000, right? Up from 13,000 in 2019. But homeowners in metro areas in California spent much more, which may reflect the budgets of higher income residents as well as the higher costs of labor. Yep. As the definition of home changed, priorities shifted. Investment in outdoor space and home offices increased significantly. So it shows shifts in home improvement projects 2018 to 2020. Interior remodels went down 4%, while outdoor upgrades went up 7%, and home offices went up 4%. A new world where everything from work to play takes place at home drove demand for outdoor upgrades and home office improvements, two key trends that continue today, while decreasing spend on interior remodels. People are living in their homes longer, giving owners time to transform their houses into sanctuaries. Nationwide, the average home ownership tenure has nearly doubled in the decade since the end of the recession to about 8 years. In the Bay Area and LA, the average tenure is even higher. Housing turnover is expected to continue to decline as more Americans age in place.
Yeah,
Macro condition.
very interesting trend to point out. And that's part of what's going on in the market with lower inventory. That's cited in many articles we cover. People are staying at home. People now have, even if you're older, you have the ability to take that 3,000 square foot house and maybe create subsidized rent in an ADU, or create another space where you can have an in-home care, live in that space to make your life a little easier. And it is a trend that's expected to continue. So yeah, important to understand.
Macro conditions in expensive markets forced would-be buyers to rent rather than settle into permanent homes. In the nation's most expensive housing markets, the widening gap between the cost of renting and owning has forced more people to put off finding their forever homes in favor of shorter-term living arrangements. Many Americans may struggle to find homes in moderately priced markets where investors have gobbled up housing stock. And it's got Phoenix listed high, Miami, Atlanta, Charlotte, Las Vegas. Investors are buying the most houses in cities with moderate PTR, price to rent ratios. Institutional investors have been targeting hotter markets where the price to rent ratios are still moderate, which will decrease inventory and further dim the prospects of individual home ownership. Let's see. As iBuyers expand, homes are increasingly treated like any other asset, but the luxury market has remained untouched so far. Recently, leading iBuyers have aggressively increased their market share nationwide, but they have not been able to crack the most competitive markets or completely shed their reputation as discount buyers. The way that a property traditionally changes hands through a trusted human broker may play too important a part of what makes a house feel like a home. The idea of home makes us warm and fuzzy inside, and the ways you're spending our time and money have proved that it's more important than ever. But as the market rebalances post-pandemic, attention could turn to the ways in which an aging population and institutional investors will affect supply and demand. We'll be watching and report back on future editions of The 8. So, yeah.
Right. So great article. Again,
Not a typical market report.
No, it's not. It's very connected with like emotions and reality and patterns and habits. And one thing, I think I've mentioned this before. I don't know exactly how they do it, but you could attempt to limit investor purchasing, possibly, to try to bring some balance to the market and somehow give an owner buyer more weight, to try to compensate a little bit for the inventory. I don't see that happening, but it's the idea that continually comes to mind for me that could have an immediate impact. Because it is what happens. Investors come in and buy up anything that has any upside potential. And nowadays with ADUs and SB 9 in place where more units can be added, it's just going to be harder and harder for a buyer to actually come in and compete with investors in some case if they're still being as aggressive in the market.
Right. Well, great. So, guys, I put this in the comments, both the LA Times article we were referring to on middle income help for rent, and then also this house versus home October market report from Avenue 8. And they do encourage you here at the bottom to sign up for their newsletter, and you can get more reports as well.